Sei Lop. On December 4th, 2025, a 62-year-old man in a blue shirt and thick black glasses stood in a courtroom in Melbourne, Australia, and bowed his head as a judge handed him 16 years in prison. To anyone watching who did not know the case, he looked like someone's grandfather. Quiet. Unremarkable. The kind of person you would walk past on the street without a second glance. That was December 2025. But a few years earlier, the United Nations had estimated that this same man's drug syndicate was pulling in somewhere between $8 billion and $17 billion a year, controlling up to 70% of the methamphetamine flooding the entire Asia-Pacific region. His name was Sei Lop, and law enforcement had started calling him the Asian El Chapo. The UN said even that comparison might be underselling it. He was born on October 25, 1963, in Guangzhou, China. As a teenager, he fell in with the Big Circle Gang, a Cantonese crime fraternity whose roots traced back to the chaos of the Cultural Revolution. These were not street-level thugs. The Big Circle boys were organized, disciplined, and ambitious. By 1988, Sei had emigrated to Canada, settled in Toronto, married, had 2 children, and taken on normal jobs at Fujifilm and Kodak as cover. On paper, he was an immigrant making a life for himself. Behind the paper, he was brokering heroin deals between the Big Circle boys and the Rizzuto crime family in Montreal. An FBI agent named Mark Kalman later said that what Sei pulled off took real nerve, because Italian mobsters normally wanted nothing to do with Asian gangsters. Sei made them want to. That arrangement held until 1998, when the FBI traced New York heroin shipments back to him through an operation called Sunblock. Because the United States had no extradition treaty with China, agents waited. On August 12, 1998, Hong Kong police arrested Sei at a restaurant in Tsim Sha Tsui. When FBI agent Kalman sat across from him for the first interrogation, Sei simply smiled at the news that he would be extradited. Kalman later said he was impressive, that he was different, and that nothing about him shouted international drug trafficker. That calm, that blankness, would define his entire career. He was extradited to the Eastern District of New York, pleaded guilty, and on September 26, 2000, received 9 years at a federal facility in Ohio. And that prison sentence, the one that was supposed to end his career, ended up launching the next phase of it. Inside federal lockup, he met a man named Lee Chung-chak. Both were released in 2006. Together, they built something no one in global drug enforcement had ever seen before. Around 2010, Sei and Lee assembled what insiders called the Company, a coalition that pulled together 5 rival Triad organizations, 14K, Bamboo Union, Big Circle Boys, Sun Yi-on, and Wo Xing Wo, under one operational umbrella. The significance of that cannot be overstated. These were groups that had been cutting each other apart for decades. Sei got them to work together. They industrialized methamphetamine production in Shan State, Myanmar, funneling Chinese precursor chemicals through the Golden Triangle and flooding the Asia-Pacific market. Australian Federal Police first identified Sei as the syndicate's leader through wiretaps on a Melbourne distributor in 2012. Then confirmed his identity through surveillance photos shared by Hong Kong police. A phone seized in 2016 from an arrested Bamboo Union member in Yangon contained extensive Sam Gore documentation. The syndicate's code name was Sam Gore, Cantonese for Brother Number 3. Sei himself traveled with a rotating personal guard of up to 8 Thai kickboxers. He once reportedly lost nearly 5.2 million pounds in a single gambling session in Macau. The scale of the operation was staggering, and the man running it was a ghost. Reuters publicly named him in October 2019. Interpol issued a red notice. Sei hid in Taiwan during COVID border closures and seemed untouchable. Then, on January 22, 2021, Dutch police arrested him at Schiphol Airport during a layover en route to Canada. He was pulled off a connecting flight. The man who had run a multi-billion-dollar drug empire across half a continent was taken down in an airport terminal. Reports later suggested Taiwanese authorities had quietly arranged his routing so that the Netherlands, which had an extradition treaty with Australia, would be the one to receive him. He was extradited to Australia on December 22, 2022. When Judge Peter Rosen handed down the 16-year sentence in December 2025, the maximum had already been capped at 25 years as part of the extradition deal with the Netherlands. AFP Commissioner Chrissy Barrett called it the conclusion of Operation Volante and said the investigation showed that the long arm of the Australian Federal Police can reach criminals across the world. Sei is eligible for parole in 2035. He will be deported to Canada upon release. And the UNODC official who had tracked Sam Gore for years, Jeremy Douglas, offered a measured assessment after the arrest. He said it was a great result, but the organization remains. That last part matters. Because what Sei Lop built was not a gang. It was an infrastructure. And the next man on this list understood that same principle decades earlier in a very different city. Juan Kuok-koi. On the morning of May 1, 1998, an explosive device ripped apart the official vehicle of Antonio Francisco Marques Baptista, the Portuguese-appointed director of the Macau Judiciary Police. Baptista had been on his morning jog and survived. That same evening, he personally led the raid team that arrested the man suspected of ordering the bombing. They found him at a restaurant inside the Hotel Lisboa, reportedly watching a television documentary about himself. His name was Juan Kuok-koi, and most of Macau knew him as Broken Tooth. Born in 1955, he grew up in the slums of Macau, joined the local branch of the 14K Triad as a teenager, and climbed the ranks under a patron named Zhao Wei before eventually turning on him. Loyalty in that world was always conditional. By the mid-1990s, Juan claimed he was earning $6 million a month from gambling junkets at the Lisboa and other casinos. The money was almost secondary to the reputation. Between roughly 1996 and 1998, a gang war between the 14K and the rival Shui Fong syndicate turned Macau into a shooting gallery. Drive-bys, stabbings, arson attacks, all ahead of the December 1999 handover from Portugal to China. An anonymous letter appeared in local newspapers in early 1997 warning that from that day forward, it was forbidden to mention Broken Tooth Koi in the press, and that bullets would have no eyes, and knives would have no feelings, and somehow, it gets worse. Just weeks before his arrest, Juan had financed a feature film called Casino, starring Simon Yam as a Macau Triad boss based directly on Juan himself. To shoot one scene, Juan personally shut down the Macau Taipa Bridge to traffic for 2 hours after the government refused him permission. He shut it down anyway. That is the kind of man they were dealing with. Someone who did not ask for the world to accommodate him. He simply assumed it would. When police searched his belongings after the Hotel Lisboa arrest, they found a Cambodian fax listing prices for rocket launchers, armored vehicles, and explosives, along with a police frequency scanner. His trial became a spectacle. A justice resigned in protest over external judicial appointments from Lisbon. Witnesses repeatedly fell ill before they could testify. On November 23, 1999, three judges convicted Juan of criminal association, loan sharking, money laundering, illegal gambling, and unlawful possession of firearms. The car bombing charge did not hold. He received 15 years, later adjusted to 13 years and 10 months. His brother got 5 years and 6 months. Reports from the courtroom said Juan leapt onto his seat and shouted that it was the great miscarriage of justice of the century, that they could not solve the case, so they were making him the scapegoat. He was released from Cologne prison on December 1st, 2012. His lawyer told reporters that all Juan wanted was for people to forget him, and that he was going to lead a quiet life from now on. Steve Vickers, a former head of Hong Kong police intelligence, dismissed him as yesterday's man. Both were wrong. Within a few years, Juan participated in an initial coin offering called Dragon Coin that raised $320 million. He founded the World Hongmen History and Culture Association in Cambodia, claimed membership in the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, a claim Beijing's foreign ministry publicly denied, and aligned himself with the Belt and Road Initiative. The convicted gangster was reinventing himself as a political figure with international reach. On December 9, 2020, International Anti-Corruption Day, the U.S. Treasury sanctioned him under the Global Magnitsky Act, describing him as a leader of the 14K Triad and one of the largest Chinese organized criminal organizations in the world, engaged in drug trafficking, illegal gambling, racketeering, human trafficking, and a range of other criminal activities. 3 associated entities were designated alongside him. The reinvention did not stop there. Justice for Myanmar, the U.S. Institute of Peace, Radio Free Asia, and C4ADS have since documented Juan as a principal investor in the Dongmei scam compound and KK Park in Myawaddy, Myanmar. The Myanmar junta itself alleged in October 2025 that KK Park's name derives from Juan's initials. These are complexes where thousands of trafficked workers are held in forced labor conditions, running cyber-enabled fraud and cryptocurrency romance scams. The U.S. Institute of Peace estimated roughly 85,000 people were trapped across Mekong scam compound complexes by 2024. Malaysia issued an Interpol Red Notice for fraud in 2021. Photos from 2024 placed him visiting the Golden Triangle Special Economic Zone, another sanctioned compound run by a man who will appear later in this video. As of late 2025, Juan Kuok-koi is at large, believed to be operating between Cambodia, Malaysia, Laos, and Myanmar. His lawyer said he wanted a quiet life. What he built instead was a sanctioned, multi-jurisdictional empire stretching across casinos, real estate, cryptocurrency, and forced labor. The man the experts wrote off as a relic became something far more dangerous than the gangster they remembered. But Juan Kuok-koi did not invent the playbook he was running. That template, the one where a gangster becomes a banker, a philanthropist, and an arm of the state, was written nearly a century earlier by a man from Shanghai, Du Yuesheng. Days before his death in the summer of 1951, Du Yuesheng asked his family to bring out the safe. Inside were "I owe us," debts owed to him by some of the most powerful people in China. He told them to burn every last one. He said that in his life he had too many grudges and entanglements, and that these "I owe us" were like ropes binding him. Burning them would free him and leave a way out for future generations. Then he died in a rented apartment in Hong Kong with an estate of just $110,000 in cash to divide among 5 wives, 8 sons, and 3 daughters. The opera singer he had married the year before received $20,000. What nobody in that room needed to be told was how those "I owe us" were earned. Du Yuesheng was born on August 22, 1888, in Gaoqiao near Shanghai. His mother died in childbirth. His sister was sold into slavery. His father died. His stepmother vanished. By the age of 9, he was an orphan. He worked as a fruit stall hand on the Shanghai waterfront, earning the early nickname Fruit Yuesheng before joining the Green Gang at 16. His patron was Huang Jinrong, the highest-ranked Chinese detective in the French concession police, and himself a gangster. In 1925, Du co-founded the Sanshin Company with Huang and a third partner named Zhang Xiaolin. The three were known as Shanghai's Three Tycoons. At its peak, Sanshin's profits from opium alone equaled roughly 1/3 of the Shanghai municipal government's total income. That is not a typo, by the way. 1/3 of the city government's revenue. Du's operations eventually covered opium, gambling, prostitution, protection, kidnapping, labor racketeering, banking, and stock manipulation. By the 1930s, he held leadership positions in more than 70 commercial organizations and 200 enterprises. He lived in a 4-story French concession mansion guarded by White Russians, with 3 monkey heads imported from Hong Kong stitched into his clothing for luck. He was no longer a fruit stall orphan. He was the most powerful man in the most dangerous city in Asia, and no one in Shanghai's underworld or overworld moved without his permission. This decision seemed small at the time. It was not. In April 1927, with Chiang Kai-shek's Northern Expedition advancing on Shanghai, the Chinese Communist Party's organizers had taken control of the General Labor Union through a general strike. Some 800,000 workers answered the call. Chiang needed the communists eliminated. He turned to Shanghai's gangsters, and Shanghai's gangsters chose Chiang because Chiang would protect the opium trade. On the night of April 11, 1927, Du invited the communist labor leader Wang Shouhua to dinner at his residence. Wang was strangled there by Du's enforcer, a man named Juan Molin. In the early hours of April 12th, Green Gang men wearing armbands marked with the character for labor, joined by Kuomintang troops, attacked communist organizing sites across the city. The operation was coordinated, systematic, and devastatingly efficient. An estimated 5,000 communists, organizers, and sympathetic workers were killed in what became known as the White Terror or the April 12th incident. It broke the urban Chinese Communist Party for a generation. Chiang rewarded Du with an honorary military rank, a seat on the Bureau of Opium Suppression, which was effectively a state monopoly license and protection of his opium shipments by the French Navy. Du had traded one night of violence for permanent political cover. Unlike his partner Zhang Xiaolin, who later collaborated with the Japanese, Du refused. He fled to Hong Kong in late 1937, then to free China. He served as vice president of the Chinese Red Cross. He donated his bulletproof limousine to the army. He committed his steamship fleet to the Yangtze blockade. He coordinated intelligence work with Chiang's spy chief Dai Li. After the war, he returned to Shanghai, attempted to become mayor, and was elected to the National Assembly in 1948. Chiang vetoed the mayoral appointment. Even the man Du had saved from the communists would not give him that much legitimacy. In April 1949, with the communists closing in on Shanghai, Du moved his family to Hong Kong for good. His health collapsed. Already addicted to his own opium and asthmatic, he spent his final years in decline. His dying wish was to be buried in Gaoqiao, in Pudong, Shanghai, next to his parents. He told an apprentice named Lu Jingxi that he must be buried there, back to his parents' side, so he could return to his roots. That wish was denied. His coffin sat in Tunghua Hospital for over a year before being shipped to Taiwan, where he was interred near Taipei beneath a statue inscribed with 4 characters meaning loyalty and personal integrity. Du Yuesheng remains the template, the poor orphan who became China's most powerful gangster, opium monopolist, banker, and executioner by proxy of a political purge. He died with almost nothing, in a city that was not his own, denied even the burial he asked for. Every figure on this list who blurred the line between organized crime and state power was, whether they knew it or not, running a version of what Du built first, and the man who comes next blurred that line so completely that an American federal court had to untangle it. Chen Chi-li. On October 15, 1984, a Taiwanese-American journalist named Henry Liu was cornered in the garage of his home in Daly City, California. He was shot once in the head and twice in the abdomen. His wife Helen heard the gunshots from inside the house. The killers arrived on bicycles. It looked like a gang hit. It was not. Within weeks, the FBI would trace the assassination not to a street gang settling a grudge, but to the Defense Intelligence Bureau of the Republic of China. The man who organized the hit was Chen Chi-li, the leader of the Bamboo Union, one of the largest and most politically entangled triad organizations in Taiwan's history. He went by the nickname Dry Duck, a childhood taunt about his inability to swim. But this story does not start in a garage in California. It starts on Bamboo Forest Road in Yonghe District, Taipei. Chen Chi-li was born on May 11, 1943, in Sichuan. His father was a Republic of China civil servant, his mother from Jiangsu. The family fled to Taiwan with the Kuomintang in 1949, and Chen grew up as one of 3 mainlander kids in a school full of Hoklo-speaking Taiwanese. He was bullied constantly. In 1957, at 14 years old, he co-founded the Bamboo Union on a street named for the bamboo groves in Yonghe District. He assumed leadership by his late teens. Under Chen, the gang grew to an estimated 10,000 to 20,000 members, with some estimates running as high as 40,000, spread across 24 divisions, expanding into gambling, extortion, drug trafficking, kidnapping, and contract killings. The Financial Times later described the Bamboo Union as the most prominent example of the Kuomintang's cooperation with gangsters in upholding its dictatorship. After the 1979 Kaohsiung incident, Chen reorganized the union to work directly with the KMT's intelligence services in suppressing political dissidents. The line between the state and the syndicate did not blur. It disappeared. Pay attention to this next detail, because it explains everything that followed. Henry Liu was a journalist who had emigrated to the United States in 1967 and become an American citizen. In 1975, he published an unflattering biography of Chiang Ching-kuo, the son of Chiang Kai-shek and then president of Taiwan. According to evidence laid out in both the Taipei trial and the United States Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, Vice Admiral Wang Xiling, the head of Taiwan's Defense Intelligence Bureau, met with a Bamboo Union intermediary in the summer of 1984. The intermediary recommended Chen. At a meeting in a DIB guest house, Wang complained about ungrateful overseas Chinese and cited Liu by name. Chen volunteered that such people should be taught a lesson and that he could be trusted with the assignment. Wang agreed. Chen and the intermediary received 4 days of intelligence training. On September 14, 1984, Chen flew to the United States. He and an associate named Wu Tun scouted Liu's gift shop near Fisherman's Wharf, but decided it was too crowded. They recruited a third man, Tung Kui Sen, for the hit at Liu's home. On October 15th, Wu and Tung cornered Liu in his garage and killed him. 3 days later, After reading press accounts of the murder and concluding that he had been deceived about Liu being a communist agent, Chen recorded a confession on tape, passed it to a contact in Houston, and named Wang and two of his military colleagues as the men who ordered the operation. The killers had refused Wang's offer of $20,000 each. And no, I am not making that up. The assassins turned down the money. The hit was done as a favor to the state. Helen Liu later told a U.S. congressional subcommittee that she believed her husband was killed by the Taiwan government because he was not just another journalist or writer. She told CBS that her husband would always say that this was America and that they would not do anything to him here. Congressman Stephen Solers stated plainly on the House floor that Henry Liu was not killed by gang members who got it into their heads on their own, but by men who were retained, commissioned, instructed, and dispatched by the Bureau of Military Intelligence for the purpose of silencing him. Chen and Wu were arrested in Taipei on November 12, 1984, in an operation the government called Clean Sweep. Wang and his subordinates were detained on January 16, 1985. Prosecutors indicted Chen, Wu, and Tung on February 27. At the April 1985 trial, Chen and Wu were sentenced to life. Harvard law professor Jerome Cohen, attending on behalf of Helen Liu, described the proceedings as a well-rehearsed performance in which the defendants read from prepared notebooks. The U.S. House of Representatives passed a resolution by 387 to 2 calling for extradition. Taipei refused. Tung Kwei-sen was caught in Brazil in September 1985, convicted in federal court in New York in 1986 on heroin conspiracy charges, and was stabbed to death in prison in 1991. You would think someone would have said something about the extradition refusal. Nobody did. Washington wanted Taiwan as a Cold War ally more than it wanted justice for a dead journalist. The Ninth Circuit's ruling in Liu versus Republic of China remains one of the very few instances where an American federal court has attributed a political assassination on U.S. soil to the intelligence agency of an allied government. Chen's life sentence was commuted in January 1991. He fled Taiwan in 1996 to escape a new round of organized crime crackdowns and lived in a 2,600-square-meter villa in Phnom Penh. After flaunting weapons on Taiwanese television in 2000, he was arrested by Cambodian police. A Phnom Penh court gave him a 3-year suspended sentence and 5 years of parole. He was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and died at a Hong Kong hospital on October 4, 2007, at the age of 64. His funeral in Taiwan drew over 3,000 mourners, including Bamboo Union, Four Seas, and Celestial Way representatives, Japanese yakuza in black suits, and crime family delegations from Hong Kong, Macau, Malaysia, and Thailand. His co-conspirator Wu Tun told reporters at the funeral that it was very disappointing that a man who sacrificed himself for the country was forced into exile overseas. Chen Chi-li was a gang leader who carried out a political assassination for a government intelligence agency on foreign soil, was tried in 2 countries, had his case reviewed by a federal appellate court, and still received clemency within 7 years. He lived the rest of his life openly in mansions until cancer took him at 64. His co-conspirator called him a man who sacrificed himself for the country. The Ninth Circuit called the operation a state-sponsored killing. It was probably both, and that is what makes the Bamboo Union story different from every other Triad case on this list. The gangster did not just serve the state asked him to. Some Triad bosses needed the state to protect them. The next one just bought the police instead. Nang Sikho. On November 13, 1974, the South China Morning Post ran a front-page headline that simply called him Mr. Big. The man they were writing about had been arrested the day before in what the head of Hong Kong's Narcotics Bureau called the greatest stride we have made for years. His drug syndicate had spent the better part of a decade importing an estimated 25 tons of opium and over 2 tons of morphine base into Hong Kong, with tentacles stretching from the Golden Triangle to Macau, Thailand, Taiwan, Singapore, Britain, and the United States. His monthly turnover ran in the millions of Hong Kong dollars. At least that was the operation the public knew about. What the investigation also uncovered was that the entire enterprise had been running under the direct protection of some of the most senior detectives in the Royal Hong Kong Police Force. 7 years before that front page, Ng Sik Ho had been nobody. Born in 1930 on the Chinese mainland, of Teochew origin, he crossed illegally into Hong Kong around 1963 during the wave of refugees fleeing the fallout of the Great Leap Forward. His nickname, Limpy Ho, came from a beating he took to his right leg with a teak post during a street brawl in Yau Ma Tei. He walked with a limp for the rest of his life. He married a woman named Chung Yuet Ying, who turned out to be just as deep in the trade as he was. From 1967 onward, Ng built his operation by sourcing raw opium from the Golden Triangle and processing it in labs scattered across Hong Kong and Kowloon. He paid 32.6 million Hong Kong dollars to Thai suppliers and resold at 10 to 15 times cost. The profit margins were extraordinary, and the volume was industrial. His enforcers were brazen enough to seize rival shipments at sea while disguised as soldiers of the People's Liberation Army. Nobody questioned uniforms on the water in those years. He is widely believed to have been behind the assassination of Chung Mon, an Amsterdam-based 14K boss, who was killed on March 3, 1975, for blocking Ng's push into European supply routes. In 7 years, Ng Sik Ho went from a limping refugee to the biggest drug lord in one of the biggest drug markets on Earth. But here's the detail that everyone missed at the time. Ng's empire did not survive because he was smarter than other traffickers. It survived because the police were on his payroll. The Royal Hong Kong Police Force in the 1960s and early 70s was rotten from the inside out, and nobody symbolized that corruption more than the so-called Five Dragons, a group of Cantonese-speaking detective sergeants who took protection payments from Triad operations as a matter of routine. The most infamous was Louis Locke, a chief detective sergeant whose unexplained wealth eventually earned him the nickname the $500 million Sergeant. Ng paid, and the police looked the other way. It was a system, not a scandal. What broke it was not an investigation into Ng. It was an investigation into a completely different kind of corrupt official. Peter Godber was a chief superintendent in the Royal Hong Kong Police who fled to England in 1973 while under investigation for unexplained assets. His escape, on a commercial flight while supposedly under surveillance, triggered a public crisis. Thousands of people took to the streets. The governor, Sir Murray MacLehose, had no choice. On February 15, 1974, he established the Independent Commission Against Corruption, an agency designed from the ground up to be completely separate from and openly hostile to the police force it was created to investigate. The ICAC's mandate was unprecedented in Hong Kong history, and its first major target would not be a policeman. It would be the man the policeman had been protecting. Within months, the ICAC's purge collapsed the protection networks that men like Louis Locke and Ng Sik Ho depended on. An international narcotics bureau task force, now operating without corrupt internal interference, closed in. Ng Sik Ho, who had moved narcotics freely across Asia for 7 years, was arrested on November 12, 1974, just 3 months after the ICAC opened its doors. In May 1975, the Supreme Court of Hong Kong convicted him of conspiracy to traffic in dangerous drugs and sentenced him to 30 years, the longest drug sentence ever imposed in colonial Hong Kong. Put differently, no drug trafficker in the history of British Hong Kong had ever received a sentence that long. His wife, Chung Yue-ying, was sentenced to 16 years and fined 1 million Hong Kong dollars. The verdicts sent a message that the old arrangements were finished. The police could no longer guarantee protection, and the courts were no longer willing to be lenient. Ng later turned witness against his former associate Ma Sik-chun, known as White Powder Ma, who had fled to Taiwan and would die there in 1992. Louis Locke, the $500 million sergeant who had shielded Ng's operation, also fled, first to Taiwan and then to Canada, with his fortune reportedly intact. Ng converted to Buddhism in prison. In April 1991, the governor reduced his sentence by 4.5 years, scheduling release for late that year. In July 1991, he was diagnosed with terminal liver cancer. He died on September 8, 1991, in custody, aged 61. He never walked free. His life was later dramatized in To Be Number One in 1991, with Ray Louis playing Crippled Ho, and again in Chasing the Dragon in 2017, with Donnie Yen in the role. Ng Sik Ho did not just run a drug empire. He exposed an entire system. His arrest was not the end of his story. It was the beginning of Hong Kong's reckoning with institutional corruption. The ICAC that brought him down went on to become one of the most respected anti-corruption agencies in the world. Ng was the cost of that lesson. Up to this point, every man on this list either went to prison, fled, or died. The next one has managed to avoid all three, despite being arrested more times than some people change jobs. If you are liking this video and you are not subscribed yet, now is the time. We drop new cases every day. Subscribe so you do not miss the next one. Kwok Wing-hung. Between 2012 and 2024, Hong Kong police arrested a man named Kwok Wing-hung on at least 5 separate occasions. The charges ranged from money laundering to criminal intimidation to conspiracy to blackmail to possession of offensive weapons. As of the most recent reporting, he has not been convicted on any major count. If you had asked anyone in Hong Kong law enforcement who Shanghai Boy was during those years, they would have told you he was the alleged former dragon head of the Yuesheng Triad, one of the oldest and most entrenched criminal organizations in the city. They had no shortage of suspicion. What they had a shortage of was convictions. Kwok was born in 1958 in Hong Kong. His nickname, Shanghai Boy, came not from his own origins, but reportedly from his father's Shanghai roots. He was recognizable in any crowd, always wearing sepia-tinted 1970s sunglasses, a swept-forward bowl haircut he claimed was an homage to Bruce Lee, and a Chinese tunic suit. He looked like a man from another era, and in some ways, he was. The Yuesheng, which he allegedly led from roughly 1998 to 2000, was founded in Sham Shui Po in 1930, making it the oldest of the Wo Group triads. Its operations covered extortion, drug trafficking, illegal gambling, and prostitution. Kwok publicly acknowledged he had left the gang. Whether the gang agreed is a different question. What made Kwok unusual was not his criminal activity. It was his public profile. In February 2012, he attended a private banquet at Lau Fau Shan with campaign aides of Leung Chun-ying, who later that year became Hong Kong's chief executive. The dinner guests included Fanny Law Fan Chiu Fun, the head of Leung's campaign office. Leung denied knowing Kwok. The dinner became a recurring scandal in pro-democracy media, an alleged Triad dragonhead, dining with the inner circle of the man about to run the city. In December 2015, Kwok announced he would hold a press conference to reveal secrets about Leung. It never happened. He canceled at the last moment after reportedly being attacked at the Peninsula Hotel. Whatever those secrets were, they stayed with him. What comes next is the part that still does not make sense. Because despite all the public attention, Kwok kept getting arrested and kept walking. In August 2012, he was swept up with 130 others in a crackdown on 2 triads suspected of laundering 300 million Hong Kong dollars. In July 2016, he was arrested at Hong Kong 1016. He was arrested at Hong Kong International Airport on arrival from Phuket, charged with conspiracy to commit criminal intimidation, conspiracy to wound with intent, and conspiracy to blackmail, tied to alleged collusion with a retired senior police superintendent in a 1 billion Hong Kong dollar fraud scheme in Macau. In November 2017, the Narcotics Bureau arrested him at his Repulse Bay flat on suspicion of laundering more than 100 million Hong Kong dollars through 4 bank accounts over a 5-year period, money that reportedly came from illegal bookmaking. Hong Kong police stated publicly that the investigation had revealed the arrested man was suspected of laundering more than 100 million Hong Kong dollars through 4 local bank accounts from January 2007 to July 2012. He was bailed at 200,000 Hong Kong dollars. He failed to report on bail in 2018 and fled. In August 2020, he was arrested again at the airport upon returning from Bangkok via Dubai on the previous bail conditions. And in 2024, at the age of 66, he was arrested in Tsim Sha Tsui with 4 other men after police found wooden rods and a metal bar in their vehicle. He was hospitalized with chest pains and placed under bedside police guard at Queen Elizabeth Hospital. 5 arrests in 12 years. Charges involving hundreds of millions of dollars, organized crime, fraud, weapons, and intimidation. And yet, as of the most recent public reporting, Kwok Wing-hung has never been convicted on a single major count. He is alive. He is in Hong Kong. And the cycle continues. His net worth is unknown. The $100 million laundering allegation and a separate 50 million Hong Kong dollar civil debt are the only public financial benchmarks that exist. Kwok Wing-hung is not the most violent man on this list. He is not the richest. He is something arguably more unsettling. He is the one the system keeps catching and never manages to hold. Every other figure covered here was eventually sentenced, sanctioned, exiled, or killed. Kwok keeps showing up, getting arrested, posting bail, and going home. The story of Hong Kong's alleged Triad dragonhead is not a story of crime and punishment. It is a story of crime and nothing. And then there is the man who did not bother with any of that. He did not need to dodge the system. He built his own country. Zhao Wei. Somewhere on the banks of the Mekong River in northern Laos, there is a place where the clocks run on Beijing time. The signs are in Mandarin, the currency is the Chinese yuan, and Roman emperor statues line the entrance to a casino with a crown on its roof. It is not China. It is not even technically a casino town. According to the Lao government, it is a special economic zone. According to the United States Treasury, it is the headquarters of a transnational criminal organization. The man who built it is named Zhao Wei, and the compound is called the Golden Triangle Special Economic Zone. He was born on September 16, 1952, in northeastern China. He started as a timber trader, moved to Macau in the 1990s, and entered the casino junket business. In 2001, he relocated to Mongla, a casino town in Myanmar's Shan state that catered almost exclusively to Chinese gamblers, operating under the protection of a local warlord named Sei Lop. He built a company called Landon Entertainment and learned the business of running casinos in lawless territory. When Beijing's travel ban shut Mongla's casinos down in 2005, Zhao did not go home. He moved again. This time, the Lao government invited him. In 2007, he negotiated a 99-year lease for a stretch of land in Bokeo province, right on the Mekong across from Thailand. Then he built something that functions less like a business and more like a private nation. Through a network of Hong Kong-registered companies, including King's Romans International and the Doc Nguyen Com Group, Zhao constructed a casino complex, hotels, a port, and eventually an airport, which opened in 2024. Mandarin is the lingua franca. The yuan and the Thai baht are accepted as currency. Chinese nationals gamble openly. The International Crisis Group, in a 2023 field visit, documented separate million-dollar cash transactions happening without documentation at the casino cashier desk, with players walking away with bundles of 100-yuan notes slung over their shoulders in duffel bags. The zone operates outside Lao law in practice, with its own security force, its own infrastructure, and its own rules. And photographs from 2024 confirmed that Juan Kuok-koi, the sanctioned 14K boss from earlier in this video, visited the zone personally. The world of sanctioned Triad bosses is a small one, and the Golden Triangle is where their interests converge. On January 30th, 2018, the U.S. Treasury designated the Zhao Wei Transnational Criminal Organization under Executive Order 13581. It was the first time a U.S. president had invoked that order against a Chinese organized crime figure. The designation stated that operating largely through the King's Romans Casino, the Zhao Wei organization facilitates the storage and distribution of heroin, methamphetamine, and other narcotics for illicit networks, including the United Wa State Army. It further stated that the organization permits and promotes human trafficking and child prostitution within the zone, and that it exploits the economic zone to engage in wildlife trafficking of endangered animals, including Asiatic black bears, pangolins, tigers, rhinos, and elephants. Treasury simultaneously sanctioned his wife Su Gui-kin, an Australian Chinese national, along with the head of casino security and a Thai national who served as company director. In December 2023, the United Kingdom added its own sanctions under the Global Human Rights Sanctions Regulations, citing forced criminality and human trafficking in the zone's scam compounds. Those scam compounds are the newer layer of the operation, and they are enormous. The UNODC, the U.S. Institute of Peace, and Radio Free Asia have documented thousands of trafficked workers, many from China and Vietnam, held in slave-like conditions inside compound facilities to operate cyber-enabled fraud operations and cryptocurrency romance scams, commonly known as pig butchering schemes. The U.S. Institute of Peace estimated that roughly 85,000 people were trapped across Mekong scam compound complexes by 2024. The Golden Triangle Special Economic Zone has been a major node since at least 2016, with periodic mass deportations of Chinese and Vietnamese nationals, including 771 in a single operation. Zhao denied all of it. At a press conference following the OFAC designation, he called the allegations groundless and said there were neither reasons nor motivations for his organization to run illegal businesses. In another statement, he called the U.S. action a unilateral, extraterritorial, unreasonable and hegemonic act of ulterior motives and malicious rumor-mongering. In December 2024, the Lao government awarded Zhao Wei a national honor. The Bokeo Military Command had already given him a Medal of Courage in 2022. The man sanctioned by the United States and the United Kingdom for drug trafficking, human trafficking, and wildlife trafficking was being decorated by the country that leased him the land. As of late 2025, Zhao Wei is free, operating openly in Laos with apparent state protection. His net worth has never been publicly verified, but the Golden Triangle Special Economic Zone alone covers thousands of hectares, and the casino, hotels, port, and airport infrastructure represent a multi-hundred-million-dollar empire, all built on a 99-year sovereign lease. He has never been arrested, never been indicted, never been extradited. He has been sanctioned by two of the most powerful governments on Earth, and the response from the country that hosts him has been to give him a medal. He runs the most openly criminal special economic zone in Asia, and the countries that could stop him either will not or cannot. The lease runs until 2106. Zhao Wei is 73 years old. He will not outlive it, but what he built almost certainly will. 7 men. 7 empires built on violence, corruption, and leverage. Some were sentenced, some were sanctioned. Some are still operating in plain sight. The only thing they all had in common was that no single country could contain them. Thanks for watching. Click here for the next video.